Well, hey there, Internet people, and welcome back to Green Wing Gaming. It's another Monday, so it's time for another hobby discussion video, and today we're delving into a topic that has more to do with pretty much anyone who's ever played Warhammer or any tabletop war game ever. And that is hobby burnout, because as long as people have been involved in this hobby, people have been getting burnt out on this hobby. So we're going to talk a little bit about what hobby burnout is, we're going to talk about a little bit how it happens, what you can do about it, and we're going to talk just a little bit about why I think a new edition of Warhammer is going to be just the shot in the arm some people, including myself, need to get over a little bit of hobby burnout. So we're going to be getting into all that in just a sec, but before we do, I would like to just remind you guys that I have only been doing this YouTube thing for about a month now. I am just starting out. This channel is very fresh. Literally, at time of recording, the channel has been live for maybe a month. And we are at that early stage where any form of activity or engagement is a bonus. So you guys have already done me a solid if you've clicked on this video, but I'm hoping that you kind, beautiful strangers on the internet, who are also very handsome and attractive, will do me one more solid of maybe liking the video, subscribing if you want to see a few more. I upload every Monday and Friday. Our Friday videos are gameplay. Mondays we do more discussion videos like this. And to that end, on any of my videos, but particularly on our Monday videos, I would like to see you guys in the comments down below. Not just because it helps out the channel, but because a big part of why I started this was wanting to get a wider array of thoughts on the hobby. So, you know, I get the same 5 or 6 guys that I hang out with at the game store. I get their opinions every week, but I'd like to see a little bit more of what you guys think about the hobby and all its comings and goings. So, with all that out of the way, we are discussing hobby burnout today, so let's just get into it. Okay, so we're talking about hobby burnout. Let's start with the basics. What is it? Well, burnout in general, and I'm going to go ahead and warn you that this isn't going to be like a dictionary definition or anything, but burnout, as I understand it, is anytime that you do something with such intensity and frequency that it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to gain any real fun or sense of enjoyment out of it. This doesn't just happen with Warhammer, it doesn't even just happen with your hobbies, it happens with work a lot. A lot of people get burnt out at their jobs, a lot of people get burnt out in their hobbies. I will say that as far as hobbies or free time goes, I think Warhammer and tabletop game, well, specifically Warhammer, is a little more susceptible to it than others. I can't remember the last time I heard someone get burnt out of playing football with their friends. Because, you know, football, you play like a game maybe once a week. There's not that many people who play it like every single day. Whereas Warhammer, it's not impossible to get in 2-3 games a week on the low end. Well, I say on the low end, that's actually probably about normal. 2-3 games a week is about what your average enthusiastic Warhammer player gets in, assuming there's an active community near them. And when you're doing something that often, and when you're painting the minis for it, because it's worth mentioning that you're not just participating in Warhammer when you're actually playing it. There's all the setup that goes into it. There's the buying the minis, and the assembling, and the painting. It's a whole big thing. You gotta start thinking about what stratagems you're gonna use. You're gonna start thinking about how you're organizing your forces, what you want to try out next. God help you if you want to start up a 2nd or 3rd army, because then it becomes a part-time job. It takes up a bunch of your time. You know, with how frequently the rules change, it's not that surprising that people can start to get really burnt out on it, on all the work that can go along with it. So that's a little bit about what hobby burnout is and how it happens. What can you do to mitigate it? Well, a big part of at least how I and how a lot of other veteran hobbyists I know who deal with it is changing it up. Trying to keep it fun. A big way is by not treating every game like it's a grand tournament. You know, as much as people will rail against power gamers and sweat lords, as if they're some menace to us. They're also kind of being a menace to themselves, because when you put that kind of pressure on every single game, you're gonna start to take the fun out of it. You just are. And that can definitely lead to hobby burnout. It's why a lot of the super try-hard players that came along in 8th edition, they either mellowed out, or a lot of them just ended up going away. I know in my area, there were a bunch of players at my Games Workshop that were super duper rules lawyers, treated every game like they were in a tournament, and that was back in like 2018, 2019, before lockdown hit. Coming back from lockdown, that store is a ghost town. Those guys are gone. I haven't seen like any of them come back, because a lot of them burned themselves out. At least the tryhards did. A lot of the more mellow guys that were just there for a good time to look at cool minis and have a wacky game, a lot of them are still around because it's not as stressful. It's not as grinding. And those were typically the guys that were more open to trying like stupid, goofy missions. If you just had like a weird, dumb idea for like mini wargaming, just had a great example of they did a battle report about themed around a Thomas the Tank Engine toy that ran through the center of the map. And does that have anything to do with Warhammer? Not really, but it's funny and it's, whatever, and it's a great way to blow off some steam. And that's a great example of how you get past burnout. It's not a coincidence that the more mellow gamers tend to last longer. I know for a while there, I started taking games super seriously because all the gamers around me were taking things super seriously, and I stopped enjoying Warhammer. It started feeling like a full-time job. I was constantly painting up whatever new unit was the new hotness so that I could have my optimized, min-maxed, meta-hugging list so that I could show up all the guys down at the shop next week. But guess what? It's a game. And at a certain point, if painting your expensive toy soldiers starts to feel stressful and not fun, maybe you need to take a step back from it. And as much as that seems a little weird for someone running a Warhammer YouTube channel to say, yeah, sometimes the answer to hobby burnout is to take a break from the hobby, to take a step back. And that doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily mean you exit Warhammer altogether. Maybe it means you step back from the physical hobbying just to like read the books, play the video games, or maybe you just stop actually playing the game to focus more on just taking some time to really focus on building and painting your army to a level that you love, taking the competitive aspect of it out and just painting to have cool minis. I've said it before in these videos, you're going to spend a lot more time looking at your minis than you're going to spend playing with your minis. So getting them to a point where they look cool to you can be a great way to step back and cool out from the hobby burnout for just a minute. And so another way of looking at that, treat the hobby as a whole thing, not just the game part. If you're like me at all, it's really easy to just fixate on the part where you get to play on the table. And that's where a lot of people who are new to the hobby get to. They just want to get to the part where, the minis are on the table and I'm playing the game and I'm doing the thing. But the problem is that getting yourself to like even a 2,000 point army, you're painting dozens of minis unless you're a Knights player. But even then, you're painting like 4 or 5 gigantic minis that take a while to build and paint, to say nothing of how expensive they are. It's gonna be a minute before you get to the table. So I talked about this in an earlier video. A big part of this hobby is learning how to take a breath. And that, I know that's easier said than done. One of the most obvious tools that I've seen that I know it helps me, and I know it helps a lot of other players, is putting yourself into a mindset of, I can't buy any new minis until I've painted the ones I already have. In my case, I tend to be a very, focused on keeping my workspace neat and tidy, which oddly enough gets a lot harder when there's a bunch of Warhammer boxes sitting around. So for me, keeping a pile of unpainted minis somewhere visible really helps me to fix it. Oh wow, that pile's really getting out of hand. I really need to paint some of that. And oh hey, if it comes down to my week got really hectic and I kind of have to choose between either playing the game or painting, if that pile of shame has gotten out of hand, typically I'll choose the painting because I can always play another day. So learning to prioritize all of the aspects of the hobby rather than just the part where you're rolling dice can be a great way to make sure you last longer in this hobby. So that's a bit of my sermon on how to deal with hobby burnout. Now, why do I think 10th edition is going to be a great way to deal with hobby burnout? Well, simply put, because a big part of hobby burnout is boredom. That's a big part of it, where you're playing the same missions with the same armies, with the same minis over and over and over again. It can start to get really repetitive, and that's where the burnout can really start to set in. When you just feel like you're doing the same thing every week, like, oh, I'm going to play one of 6 missions with the only faction I have against the 3 guys I know that play Warhammer. It can get repetitive. It can definitely feel like you're just beating your head against the wall doing it over and over and over again. But guess what? New edition means new rules, which means the game is likely going to play very differently. I like to think of it the same way as thinking like the difference between Warhammer 40k versus 30k, or the Horus Heresy, for those of you who are uninitiated. 30k is a very different game to 40k. It has a lot of really similar looking models, and a fair number of similar rules, particularly with 10th edition coming. It looks like they're going to be hemming their way back towards a lot of like 7th edition 40k and 30k style rules, but that's another video. But 30k has a whole other tempo. 40k tends to lend itself more towards, we're going to hurl ourselves at each other, kill each other a bunch, and oh yeah, we might score some points along the way. 30k is the game that I genuinely see some people like, hey, I'm literally not going to shoot a single gun this turn. The first 2 turns are literally just me setting up my end game. Where I have legitimately seen 30k players win their game in the movement phase of turn 2. That really never happens in 40k because it's a very different pace. But that can, oddly enough, is kind of a good thing. The fact that I play 30k and 40k does wonders to keep me active in playing Warhammer at all, because they're just different enough from each other and set in just different parts of the lore. I use different enough minis that the whole thing feels distinct. And I think the new edition is going to help with that too. I think 10th edition is really going to be a shot in the arm. It's going to be different enough. It's still going to be the lore you love, the minis that you've labored over, but the game is definitely going to change. Looking at some of these rules, the way they're changing characters, the way they're changing how you hold objectives, the way they're changing how you even score points. I mean, to my shock and surprise, the main like matched play format is gonna look an awful lot like Tempest of War from 9th edition. Didn't see that coming at all, but it's gonna be really different from how 9th edition matched play works. Different enough that it's gonna vary it up a bit. So, for those of you who are maybe a little cynical about 10th edition or new editions at all, I think change is good. Our brains are programmed to analyze patterns, and we're about to get a whole bunch of new patterns to analyze. So, if any of you are out there who are maybe feeling a little bit of the grind of 9th edition, of just how killy it has gotten, of just how lethal it gets, and how almost impossible it feels to play an actually durable army, I have a hefty feeling that 10th edition is going to be just what you need to stay invested. So hopefully you guys are as excited as I am. If not, I would love to know why, or if you agree with me, especially if you agree with me. I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me how right I am. What is YouTube for if not for stroking my own ego? But I do want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments down below, and in case you haven't picked up on it, you've now reached the end of the video. So if you've made it this far, I really do appreciate it. Hopefully something I said was in any way helpful to you. I really hope it was. If not, try again next week. Definitely come back for more videos. But seriously, I would love to see you guys down in the comments below. I would love to see you over on the next video coming up next week. I believe next week we'll be talking about, we should be talking about either list building or power gaming. I forget which one it is. It's one of the two. But that'll be coming up next week. We've got another Rangers of Shadowdeep coming this very Friday. If I'm not mistaken, we should actually be starting the 3rd main rulebook mission of Rangers of Shadowdeep this Friday. So that's a lot to look forward to. But yeah, I hope to see you in any of those upcoming videos. But in the meantime, happy wargaming.
Onward to glory!